to our press conference. Thank you for joining us this morning once again for this press briefing. My name is Lerato Ngobeni. I'm the National Spokesperson of Action SA. I think it's important, just before we start and we get into the formal proceedings of this morning, for me just to give you a sense of, first of all, why we're here and why this process is important. We, as you know, we've come out of elections as of last Monday, and of course the big buzzword at the moment is coalition. And so our organization has gone into a process of involving South Africans in the process of finalizing our framework for coalitions. And so I think I want to remind South Africans that this is not new what we're doing to Action SA. As you know, Action SA is born out of the process that was called the People's Dialogue that began at the end of Mr. Mashaba's term as the mayor of the city of Johannesburg. And that process sought to understand whether or not, when the people asked Mr. Mashaba to form his own political party, the decision was that it would seem, what's the word that they use, self-serving to do so without consulting and getting empirical data and evidence as to whether that would be a viable option and whether South Africans actually want another political party to enter the fray. And so we received, as you know, through the People's Dialogue, I think we've communicated this quite extensively, about 2.4 million South Africans who responded through that process, and as a result gave Mr. Mashaba and the team at the time the mandate to form a new political party, which we now know as Action SA. And so there have been many examples where we've demonstrated our commitment to having South Africans walk with us in this journey. The first one being, you remember that we were trying to register as a new political party. We had the objection from the IEC letting us know that there's another political party that is disputing our logo. And so as opposed to us, as the proverbial behind closed doors sentiment of having to decide on our own, we took it to the public as to whether we should change our logo or whether we should fight on. And South Africans came back to us in their numbers saying that we should just change the logo. And in fact, they did us a massive favor, because those of you who know graphic design, how difficult it is to use multiple numbers in different ways. And so I think that all of us here, and South Africans in general, are very pleased about the current logo that we have, and that we don't have to run around with all the different colors of the flag. So we're very pleased about that. You can see our colleague there in the black shirt. The design of it becomes very, very pleasing and not confusing, so we're happy about that. The second one, which was a groundbreaking primaries process. I think you all remember that before we had ward councillor candidate-elects as well as mayoral candidates, we went back to South Africans and communities across the municipalities and metros in which we finally contested for South Africans to elect their own ward councillor candidates. And that was groundbreaking, never been done in South Africa before. But we also, as Action SA, demonstrated to South Africa that actually having a primaries process in the country, as well as having online type of election processing going, is actually possible. And we did that. It was quite a successful process. And so we were happy about that. It was not without glitches. However, on the whole, I think over 90% of what we did was fantastic. And so South Africans were very pleased about that. And then finally, why we are here is that as the coalition's buzz talking was happening last week, as political parties were all waiting with bated breath to see who was going to govern the different metros across the country, we then on Thursday had a press conference to announce that we would not go again behind closed doors and decide as Action SA on our own as to how it is we're going to undertake these coalition discussions. And so Mr. Mashaba announced at that press conference that we would launch a public participation platform, which we did through our website, where we took South Africans along to say, please give us a sense as to how it is you would advise us to undertake these coalition discussions. And South Africans have come back. It was quite astonishing to have, I think it was even more than 5,000 respondents by Friday, I think by the second day. And that was quite groundbreaking. But we realized again that there are shortcomings with leaving everything to technology, because there are communities that do not have access or adequate access to Wi-Fi and smartphones. And so we undertook in the weekend to have our ground forces go again back to communities to assist with that process, so that our people who are volunteers on the ground were able to assist those who do not have access to Wi-Fi and adequate smartphone technology to be able to participate. And so, you know, it was not a perfect process. It was in a short space of time, but I think we got good response from good demographic sample of South Africans who responded to the public participation platform, which I believe is now closed. So we want to thank South Africans for that. And so with that said, colleagues, what you're going to hear following my talk now is the fact that I think all South Africans, including our members and our organization, are very pleased by the fact that we are sitting at 2.6% of the votes across the country. We are the 6th largest party now in South Africa, having been born only a year and a bit ago. And we are the 3rd largest party in the city of Johannesburg. What we understand and appreciate is that 2.6% is not our own, it belongs to South Africans. And so we are here to give you feedback on the public participation process that we undertook last week, as well as to tell you where we are sitting with the discussions and coalition conversations that are currently undergoing. I just want to introduce my colleagues who are at the table, and I will go from left to right without any order of importance. On my far right is our colleague who's the mayor or candidate for Action SA for the city of Tshwane, Mr. Abel Tau. Mr. Abel Tau also is part of the Action SA Coalition's negotiating team. Everybody who you see here is part of that team, barring the ones I will mention. Next to Abel Tau, we've got the Action SA Housing Provincial Chairperson, Mr. John Moody, who is also part of the negotiating team. Next to John, we've got Ms. Faithy Mentor, who is no stranger to all of South Africans. She's also part of the negotiating team. She's also the Action SA Western Cape Provincial Chairperson. Next to Ms. Mentor, we have Mr. Michael Beaumont, who's also no stranger to you all. He is our National Chairperson. And next to him, we have Dr. Makhosi Khoza, who is the Provincial Chairperson for KwaZulu-Natal. She was also the mayor candidate for eThekwini Municipality. She's also part of the negotiating team. And then to my immediate right is our president, Mr. Herman Mashaba, who is also the mayoral candidate for the city of Johannesburg. He is not part of the negotiating team. Neither is Michael Beaumont. I want to make those 2 points very clear. The order of proceedings is as follows, so we can move on swiftly. First, we will have Michael Beaumont, who will give you all the feedback of the results that happened, that came through the public participation platform. Following Michael Beaumont will be Mr. John Moody, who will give us an update on coalition discussions underway at the moment. And then straight after John Moody, we will have Mr. Mashaba give us closing remarks. Is it Michael? No. Oh, okay, don't worry. Yeah, I'll hand that one. And then lastly, Mr. Mashaba will give us closing remarks. And then we will have a moment to have a question and answer process. So do prepare your questions so that they are succinct and they are not essays of questions, and then we can answer them quite swiftly. With that said, thank you so very much. I give over to our national chairperson, Mr. Michael Bowman.
All right, good morning everyone, to members of the media, my colleagues, and to South Africans who are following these proceedings. It's obviously a great pleasure to be here, and as Lerato has indicated, a process has been followed that we are very proud to present as a first in South African political history. I think I do want to say, particularly on Lerato's introduction, I think the most amazing part about this election result, where Action SA has emerged as the sixth biggest political party with 2.6%, took place in an environment where we contested 6 municipalities out of 278. And a huge number of people are coming forward to Action SA to see what kind of result could be produced when we're contesting 9 provinces and the full suite of municipalities. I think straight off the cuff, in terms of our public engagement process, let's dive straight into it. If the technology will work with me, there we go. So the process involved the online survey. It was launched on Friday the 4th and ran Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and the period of yesterday was used to collate all that information. I think what was remarkable is in a very short space of time, 17,500 people were involved in participating in that process. And I think you will appreciate that when you look at polling and modeling and all sorts of things conducted during elections, a sample of 17,500 is more than adequate to provide a very accurate assessment of how South Africans feel about these things. I think one of the most important things to point out at this point in time is that in this process, we did not limit this exercise to Action SA members or supporters. This process was open to all South Africans. They had to go online and they had to verify their information, because we do want to make sure that people who are registering these opinions are registered voters from municipalities who are real people and not just kind of people who are trolling these processes. And what we found was a remarkable level of engagement. People really did participate in this process with a great deal of enthusiasm. As Lerato has indicated, a lot of people in South Africa have limited access to technology, and particularly with the prohibitively high cost of data in South Africa. It was very important for us to hit the streets over the course of the weekend and ensure that we were taking this opportunity to people on the ground and ensuring their voices were heard in this process across our municipalities in which we contested. By way of the breakdown of respondents, you will see it there, the vast majority from the city of Johannesburg, but very large samples from Tshwane, Ekurhuleni and eThekwini respectively. Obviously smaller samples from KwaDukuza and Newcastle, but I think you will appreciate that 2 and 1% of a 17,000 person survey is very adequate for very small municipalities like Newcastle and KwaDukuza. I think most importantly, and if there's perhaps one thing we take above all else from the public engagement process that emerged, is 91% of respondents have said we need to try and make sure that Action SA is part of government. In other words, these are individuals who clearly have received Action SA's message that we are not an opposition party, we're a party of government, and they have responded by saying whatever you do, you need to make sure that you are part of government. And I think that mandate is exceedingly clear. In asking them what are the most important negotiating principles, what should be at the heart of our negotiating process and the agreements that we come up with, it was very interesting to see that by far the vast majority believe that service delivery needs to be at the heart of our process. I think importantly, it says that it needs to be with parties who share our values, which is an important point, and we need to work to keep the ANC out of government. Now, I think the point is when you read these 3 things together, it is an overwhelming mandate to say we need to ensure that whatever we do, we keep the ANC out, we deliver services, and we join only with political parties with whom we have a connection in terms of our values. And then finally, and very importantly, is the discussion around political parties that people felt we should or shouldn't work with. And you will see on the slide behind me the results that emerged from that process. Now, while many of you would be inclined to look at this information to suggest that we should now rank this in order of who people would like us to work most closely with, I would like to suggest to you that the most important part of the information in the slide is that while South Africans would like us to unseat the ANC and deliver services, they do not hold very strong views about political parties we should work with. Because rather than trying to understand that one party may have 29% support and another 16% support in terms of their joining with us, the actual truth is the vast majority of respondents do not like the political parties that are on offer to Action SA. They are heavily divided about that, and it would be more important to read that between 71 and 94% of respondents do not support the political parties on display. And that is a very important factor that Action SA is going to need to bear in mind throughout this process. And then finally, I think by way of the key outcomes in terms of what needs to be taken from this engagement process, the first thing is that South Africans have responded favorably to being asked to participate in a process of this nature. I think we need to be clear, not only has this never been done before, we are the only political party doing it now. And I have seen much engagement in the digital world where people from other political parties feel quite hard done by, that in order to have their voice in a coalition discussion, they need to participate in the discussions of a political party they didn't even vote for, which I think is a remarkable fact. I think the next point is that the vast majority of respondents want Action SA to remove failing governments and remove the ANC, and there's a real sense amongst people that the ANC's demise in this election is something that we need to consolidate ahead of 2024. Beyond that, South Africans want service delivery from political parties with shared values. And I think if you dig deep down into that, there's a conversation about stability that is very important that I know that our president will be referring to shortly. And that there is an overwhelming distrust of political parties that are available for these coalition discussions. And that means that Action SA needs to ensure that its process concluding a negotiation has to produce an agreement that mitigates the distrust and concern that clearly people have with these political parties. So I think from my side, we will obviously ensure that this information is shared. It is, of course, public information anyway, and it must be honored as such. And I think with that, let me pass on to the next speaker. Thank you, Lerato. John.
Thank you very much.
You've got to swap seats with me.
Hello, can you hear me?
You've got to swap seats.
John?
Good morning. Okay. Thank you. Just to give you a quick feedback as far as our coalition talks are concerned, thank you, Lerato, for introducing the panel. I will just refresh your memories. It's myself, Dr. Makosi Kosa, who's on my left, to my right, Faiki Mentor, and to my extreme right, Abel Tau. We comprise of the negotiating team as put together by our Senate. Now, on the onset, let me explain that we have, and also just make you aware of the fact that we have had telephonic conversations with a number of political parties, which includes the ACDP, the AIC, COPE, GOOD, and the IFP. On Friday, on short notice, we received a call and a request for a meeting from the DA. And given the short period of time, it was just myself and Abel Tau who were able to attend that meeting, which was attended by Helen Ziller and Thomas Walters on behalf of the Democratic Alliance. And that was more touch-base type of meeting, which was very brief as far as the actual negotiation talks are concerned, because there was a proposal put forth by them about Tshwane, that they want a stable government in Tshwane that can deliver services to the people. And of course, my response was, why do we not include Johannesburg? For we also have an omnibus approach, which is to speak about coalition and the possibility of coalitions in all municipalities where we have contested for elections. And it is that in mind that I am surprised by the fact that this morning in the media we learned that the DA has got no problem with having Mr. Mashaba as a mayoral candidate in Johannesburg. That was not even raised at that particular brief interaction with regard to coalitions. But be that as it may, we remain open to communicate and to discuss what is in the best interest of the people of South Africa overall, and more specifically in the municipalities we have contested, and in particular Johannesburg and in Tshwane. Because ultimately we want to give to the people what is just and right for them, and to ensure that we have a prosperous future that is based upon stable, clean, efficient and effective governance. So we await for further communication from the Democratic Alliance. We did have a meeting with the EFF yesterday, an in-person meeting with the EFF yesterday as a team. And as a team, we have some very serious, reservations about the pitch that was forwarded to us or made towards us yesterday. And also last night, early evening, we received an electronic version of the proposed service delivery pact with us. And after this meeting, together as a team, we will be going through that document with a fine-tooth comb, so as to see what it actually entails, and that for us to get to understand what it is that they are proposing. And today, in fact, we will be having a face-to-face meeting with the IFP as well as with COPE. So that is where we are at this moment in time. And as I indicated, we are open to have discussions and talks with all political parties except the ANC, of course, because we put the interests of South Africans first. Is there anything that I've perhaps forgotten? Thank you. Nkosi and Abel? Thank you.
Thank you, John. We are now pass the mic over to Mr. Michael Beaumont, who is going to outline our coalition agreement for your interest. I forgot to mention that at the outset.
All right, thank you. It's a real game of musical chairs here, so we like to keep things interesting. What we're now going to do is spend some time walking you through Action SA's submissions into a coalition agreement. And I think just by way of a little bit of context here, it's very important to appreciate that coalitions need to be defined in terms of a written agreement. They can't just be dealt with in terms of verbal discussions, because there are some very particular things that have to be agreed to in terms of how they interact, how political parties within those coalitions conduct themselves, to ensure that their agenda being served is that of the residents, and particularly within the environment where so many people have reservations about the stability of coalitions. This is a very important point. I think it also needs to be premised on the idea that these are Action SA's inputs. In other words, we fully accept the fact that there will be other political parties with whom we may work that will have their own inputs, and we have no doubt that whatever agreement may ultimately be concluded would be an amalgamation of the different inputs of political parties, and we have the humility to understand that. So firstly, it's very important to understand that the values and norms that we will be ensuring through this coalition agreement are to achieve a healthy working relationship between parties, to reduce the scope for conflict and therefore instability, to provide mechanisms to address the inevitable conflict that may arise and that cannot be removed, to produce transparency for how these governments and these arrangements are managed, which has been a very central part of what we are doing here today, and to generate a regular review to ensure that these agreements are kept up to date and adapt to the circumstances in which coalitions find themselves. A very important part is obviously in our preamble to our document, in which we characterize the situation in South Africa and in municipalities in general, because it is very important that coalition partners have an understanding and a shared understanding of the state of things in South Africa, how things have come to be the way they are, but very importantly, a mutual commitment to how we will work together in order to deal with the situations in which so many South Africans find themselves today. We have put down our core values as an organization, because as you will recall from the engagement process presented to you, South Africans want us to work with organizations that have similar values. In this regard, in the local government context, we're talking about economic prosperity, we're talking about non-racialism, a commitment to social justice, and achievement of the rule of law, quality education, which is also a feature at local government level in terms of early childhood development, ethical leadership, and a capable civil service. These are the values that are central to our arrangement, and when we say we will only partner with organizations that share our values, that is exactly what we are talking about. It's very important in this agreement that all political parties commit to the idea of being humble. And what we mean by that is accepting the principle that no party has gotten an outright majority and shouldn't act as they have. Each political party must understand that they have a responsibility to bring to the table solutions and listen to solutions of other political parties so that there's a diversity and a combining of manifestos to address the complex lived realities that is that of South Africa. Importantly, it deals with transparency, and again, exactly what we are doing here. So the first thing is, upon signing this agreement, the signatory parties will present its contents together, because we must have these contents of this agreement public, with all the details contained therein. We have said that the constituent parties should hold quarterly media briefings to report the performance of the municipality, to raise opportunities to improve the lives of South Africans, to identify challenges that may exist within government, and there must be a continuous process of opening up the management of coalitions so that the bright light of scrutiny and public attention can shine in how these things are being managed. We have said that if there is any allegation of impropriety against a political party or a representative of a political party in a coalition agreement, it must be openly communicated, it must be openly investigated, and upon the conclusion of that investigation, the findings must be made public. As we have communicated already, this must include any allegations of wrongdoing that have taken place within the last 5 years of coalition government, because it's important that everybody knows who they are partnering with and that we are working with individuals who operate on an ethical basis. We have said that all political office bearers within these coalition arrangements will undergo annual lifestyle audits, the outcomes of which will be made public, and they will similarly agree to the publication of their disclosures of interests, which is an important part to ensure there are no conflicts of interest. We have indicated that in addition to that, an independent entity will be tendered by the City of Johannesburg that must oversee tender processes in all municipalities, tender processes that must be observed by this independent entity, the purpose of which is to ensure that tender processes are being watched and that any tender irregularities are being openly communicated to the public and investigated by the relevant municipality. We cannot have coalitions where it is rumored that political parties are involving themselves in these processes without having the requisite observations of how they are taking place. The most important part of our coalition agreement resides in the section we call a Common Service Delivery Program of Action. And what we mean by that is you can agree to all of these things and you can agree to position sharing and all sorts of things, but it is meaningless if there's not an agreement on the service delivery agenda that has to be delivered in every municipality. And this is where we will spend the bulk of our time in this coalition agreement. What is important is that in this section we will identify the service delivery priorities of a municipality. What is also very important is we must identify what are the non-priorities, because in the resource-constrained environment of local government, in order to adequately fund your priorities and make that impact, you have to defund your non-priorities. We lay down a number of principles, which include the appointment of credible and qualified officials without political interference. We talk about a change management program that aligns institutional culture to the new service delivery agenda. We talk about an institutional review that ensures the design of the municipality is aligned to its service delivery priorities. We talk about a performance management system that is aligned to the priorities of service delivery so that all departments and entities' requirements are broken down to the levels of individuals and teams and their contributions are being measured. That a mutually codependent pro-poor and pro-business service delivery agenda prioritizes both the work of addressing inequality and the preconditions for economic growth and job creation. An infrastructure-led growth and maintenance capacity that produces an increasing reliability of service and takes services to communities that have never had them before. Responsible, sustainable financial management and compliance practices, and open and fair allocation processes when it comes to housing, tenders, and temporary work opportunities in these municipalities. I think, ladies and gentlemen, while one could go on, and this document certainly does, you will get the essence of what it is we're talking about. And while we are willing to engage any political party in terms of what they believe should be added to these things are very important. And when our survey engaged South Africans on shared values, these are certainly things that represent our shared values as an organization. For the sake of everybody, what we will ensure is within the next 24 hours, this document will be uploaded on our website and will be available for anybody to receive. And it will also include a much more detail-oriented breakdown of what we mean in terms of the specifics of a service delivery agenda in each of the municipalities we are referring to. Within the next 24 hours, that will be made available on our website. Thank you, Lerato.
Michael, do you want to do the thing before? You want to come back there? All right? Okay.
Not working, even if I spray it, or will the spray make it work?
Yeah.
No.
Press. Yeah, boy.
Okay. That's good, it's working. Colleagues, members of the media, fellow South Africans, thank you very much for giving us this opportunity to share with you what we as Section SA believe to be more than important for the South African political landscape. We come from a very difficult past of colonialism, past of 70 years under the National Party government, 27 years of ANC corruption and misrule, the last 5 years of failed coalition arrangement with a new democratic country. And I think we need to be fair to ourselves, but at the same time take learnings from our mistakes. The last 5 years of failed coalition arrangement has been a disaster, not a disaster to political parties, because the political parties carried on with their lives. Who suffered are the residents, our voters, our South African citizens. So we cannot afford to really make the same mistakes. We are human beings, we make mistakes, we are fallible, but that does not mean that we've got to continue making the same mistakes. For us as Section SA, the 2.6% voting pool that we received, we don't really take it for granted. We are here as servants of the 2.4 million people who voted us into power. Real servants. And we are grateful for the opportunity that they gave us. We represent them. We don't represent Action SA. Action SA is a vehicle. And I think we've been really very clear as a political party from the day we were founded that we are here to represent society. Action SA is a vehicle through which all of us as public representatives are going to serve society and put society first. So one thing I want to really make it really very clear, that this complex, difficult period we're going to go through, because obviously when we were campaigning to get outright majority in all the municipalities. That's how human beings operate. You don't operate to really be in the second league. You want to be in the first league. But at the end of the day, the voters are the ones who ultimately makes the decision. So us as Action SA, we want to make it very, very clear, representing this communities, and I think they've given us the mandate. We are not going to go into a coalition arrangement at all costs. I think it's very important to note, because we have consulted with the voters, and I think what's even more profound is that we did not just only consult with people who voted for us. We opened up this platform to everyone who lives in the 6 municipalities we contested. And I think for us, we really want, and I really want to plead with political parties wanting to engage us in this very important future of this country. Please engage us, show mutual respect. I think it's very important because we believe very strongly that the only way that we can succeed is if we show mutual respect. I was the mayor of the city of Johannesburg, had really terrible experience. I went into an arrangement, very difficult, complex arrangement, and as an outsider, I had no clue about politics, but I was born and brought up to recognize common decency and respect. And I went into that arrangement with it. Unfortunately, it was impossible because of the arrogance displayed by certain parties. So I think we want everyone who wants to really engage with us. Whether you bring one seat, whether you bring in 44 seats like us, please treat that political party with one vote as equal partners in this arrangement, because that is the will of the people. It's not us who actually made that decision. All the parties that wants to work with us must understand that we're going to put people first. It's not about political parties. We must forget and put our core values or whatever. There are certain things, yes, that are not negotiable. But at the end of the day, we've got to put people of South Africa first. If you believe you want to put your party ahead of saving society, then please don't waste our time, because the deal is already it's not going to be concluded. So I think it's important for political parties wanting to negotiate with us that we put South Africans first. And I think what's also very important is that we need to do everything possible to ensure that we have stable government. We cannot afford to get into an arrangement where we can already see in advance a possibility of an unstable government. One of the fortunate South Africans was involved in coalition arrangement over 3 years. Lots of learnings from that, where you can see in advance that this particular political party, it's not advisable to get involved in it, because yes, you can do it now for political expediency, but somewhere along the line, you're going to have challenges. So when we see challenges, what we are saying, please, let's rather be open to our fellow South Africans, because it's in our interest that we do this, to say, look, we don't feel comfortable going into bed with this particular political party, because we are going to encounter challenges with them. So it's important when we pick up coalition partners, stable government has to really be one of the key aspects of what we need to really look into, because honestly we'll be failing ourselves or ultimately failing people of our country. We are very clear as Action SA that in the event we are unable to conclude a coalition arrangement, we are happy to not really be in government, to be in opposition benches, which would be very unfortunate. We said to people of South Africa when we were campaigning that we don't want to be in the opposition benches, but people have spoken, whether we like it or not. Let's say, for an example, in the city of Johannesburg, with 16%, where we really exceeded, we performed well, but you can't form a government with 16%. So in the event that we are unable to find coalition partners that can work with us to serve people of South Africa, we are happy to be on the opposition benches and prepare ourselves for 2024, a big project which is around the corner. I can tell you now, we're going to wake up tomorrow, 2024 is around the corner. So we are happy to be in the opposition benches, prepare ourselves to set up structures throughout the country. As you are aware, we're sitting right now with only 3 provincial chairpersons. So we've got 6 more provinces to ensure that we have a full-time provincial chairpersons who can start the work of preparing Action SA for 2024. So we're happy to do that. You know, one thing that I discussed earlier on with my colleagues, and I think it's very important to let people of South Africa know that in the event that no political party in any of the municipalities we've contested and we ring out part of that council, in the event that no one actually manages to get outright majority, we're not afraid to really go for an election rerun. This is for us a last option, and we are going to do everything possible to ensure that we don't go into an election rerun. We'll do everything in our power to ensure that we complete coalition arrangements so that we can serve the residents, because ultimately failure to form a government it would be unfortunate. Who suffers? We know obviously in this country we are facing voter apathy. We've just went through the lowest voter turnout. So voter apathy is there. Is it going to be there forever? We don't know. We can't really focus for now. And there are cost implications for election rerun. It's running an election campaign. It's not a cheap exercise. We don't have unlimited budgets as in SA. We are constrained financially like all other political parties, but if you are forced to go for a rerun, we will do that. But I think what is actually would be very, very, very unfortunate, actually the last point that I'd like to bring to attention is that you can imagine during that period when we are campaigning again, who's going to suffer are the residents, because there's going to be a government vacuum. In the event when you don't have government, who suffers are our residents. And I don't have to really tell you the plight of our people out there across the country. Across the country, service delivery has been a huge challenge. Huge challenge. We don't have electricity. We've had stage 4 load shedding, potholes. Us as the city of Johannesburg, I landed here last night when I got home. My wife was telling me that there's a possibility of us having water shortages, street lights not working, public safety a huge issue. And that's really what local government is about. It's actually the core phase of service delivery. When you have local government collapsing in any nation, you've got a disaster. I know of so many countries where people are actually happy not to have national government, but they cannot afford to have local government collapsing. You know, actually, I remember some few years ago in Belgium, I've got business friends and people I know there for a couple of years. They did not have national government and they were the happiest. But they cannot afford not to have local government, because local government is at the core phase of service delivery. So you can imagine, if you look at the failure of local government, the last 27 years of our democracy, to subject people to another 90 days, because it will take 90 days to go through that election process. But in the event we are unable to form a government, nothing we can do. It's something that is completely outside the control of Action SA. It is for that reason that we'll do everything possible, as long as other parties will approach us with viable, people-centric proposals for us to save this beautiful country of us. Our people deserve government and they deserve better. Thank you very much from my side.
Thank you, Dr. Mashaba. Colleagues,
Stay there.
before we open up the Q&A, let me just hand over to Michael to just give us a few pointers.
Thank you, Loretta. And I think just very briefly, members of the media, you undoubtedly have a number of questions, but I really just wanted to appeal to you that Action SA has committed itself to a first in this country by engaging you with this level of transparency and openness, sharing with you where we stand, providing you information that no other political party provides. But at the same time, it's very important that when we engage one another with questions and answers, we appreciate that we cannot at the same time sabotage negotiations by engaging on a level of detail with conversations that are still quite premature. So if you wouldn't mind bearing with us, we have a responsibility to those people. People will not negotiate with us in good faith if, what they say in the early days of negotiations is being published in the media the next day. And we commit ourselves to continuously share more and more information with you going forward. And certainly when negotiations get to a much stronger and more final point. So I hope you don't mind that when we receive your questions, there may be questions that you feel frustrated by our inability to answer. But I think please appreciate that when South Africans say they want us to enter coalitions, they don't expect us to be the ones that prevent that from happening by way of being irresponsible with information. So I hope you appreciate where we come from in that regard.
Sorry. Thank you, Michael. Just a note, colleagues. For those of you who are joining us virtually on the various platforms, please do send your questions if you have any to our WhatsApp groups. I know those were created, or to my phone number, which you all have. It's on all of the media advisories that we send out. I'm going to take questions, a round of 3 questions at a time. I do have questions that I received in advance on my phone. Please do state your name, the organization you represent, as well as the respondent you intend to answer your question. Colleagues, I ask that you please adhere to what Michael just stated just now, just so that we can have a swift process. Thank you very much. Let me give you, I'll give you the first question, you will follow, and then I'll give it to Catherine, because Catherine requested in advance, and then I'll come to the rest of it. Thanks, colleagues. Go ahead.
Right, it's Marcel Mashaba from NCA. I just wanted to ask Mr. Mashaba, in terms of Johannesburg, do you want the leadership in Johannesburg?
Thank you, Masako. Can I just ask that we please do not limit questions to Mr. Mashaba alone? We have 7 people or 6 people at this table. They ask that we have that in advance. I can assure you that whatever knowledge he has, all of these colleagues at this table have seen. So, sir, I'll give it to you.
The diet was wonderful, empowering. Mr. Mashaba, how is your relationship with the Democratic Alliance post October 2019, if I remember correctly? Have you ironed out the differences that would have led you to take part from the party, and do you think that it would be easier to work with them, looking at the numbers and also the meeting that has come out with the provincial chair? Thank you very much.
Thank you. I hope that's the penultimate question for Mr. Mashaba. Let me give it to Catherine.
Thank you. So the first question was a question that I would very much like to have asked, but I'm going to skip over, hoping you answer that as well. So in the past we've seen that coalition governments have been quite unstable. This is something that you even mentioned here today. How do you intend to ensure stability within your co-governance? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So Dr. Masako wants to know what your position is on the mayorship of Johannesburg following these discussions. Dieta wants to know what your relationship with the DA is post your departure. And then what did Catherine ask? The
Ensure
stability question.
stability, yeah.
All right, so Mr. Mashaba, I'll give it to you, the first two.
Okay, thank you very much. Masiko, I was actually quite taken aback the last few days, and I tried to address it with the media as to the source of this particular demand. I don't know who made it to who, that Action SA's demand is that Mashaba must be the mayor of the city of Johannesburg. We, as Action SA, we have absolutely no knowledge. I checked immediately this matter came out. I requested our negotiation team because by then they'd only had one official meeting with the DA on Friday afternoon, whether an issue around Johannesburg came, and you had John indicating that the only issue discussed was the DA asking about a stable government in Tshwane. No other municipality was discussed, and Don made it clear to the DA that we're not here to discuss Tshwane, we're here to discuss all the municipalities where we participated. So the question of me being a mayor goes as far as Action SA putting me up front as the executive mayor candidate. And the residents of the city of Johannesburg gave us 16%, which we appreciate. It's a historic performance by any measures. But however, one cannot really be a mayor with 16%. For you to really be a mayor, you need majority of council, of people in council. But you can't also be a mayor when you don't have 50 plus 1, because it's well and good you can be elected as a mayor. If you're a mayor where you don't have 50 plus 1, you won't be able to pass your budget, you won't be able to pass your IDP and so forth. So I think for us as Action SA, question of mayorship, it's actually, it does not even appear in our document that Michael just already shared with you as part of our coalition agreement. So we don't know what the source comes from. I think we sit with a problem. That's why I raised the issue of mutual respect and transparency. I don't know obviously where the source is, but it's not an Action SA demand. We want and we elaborated on the issues that we believe are important. So being the mayor is the last thing in the world. In fact, I even said from the beginning, getting into politics was the last thing in the world wanted. I just wanted to save my country from the ANC. And we've succeeded. If you look at all the municipalities we contested, not a single one of them ANC is over 50%. So that's really what we wanted to really get involved in. Power FM, regarding the relationship with the DA. My personal relationship with the DA is what under the bridge. I'm not in this job to make friends with anyone, including my colleagues here. I'm in this job to serve society. Friendship is something that I value. My being is around ensuring that I keep friends, but keeping friends for the right reasons. So with the DA, we are happy to continue working with them. In the event we are forced to really work with them, but at a professional level. There is a lot that we share in common. That's why in the first place I joined the DA. But obviously I've got disappointments that led to my resignation. And I'm happy to talk to them if they can address issues that made me to leave the DA as part of us joining them in government. Because for us, poor people are part of our agenda, and no way we're going to be compromising on that. We are not going to support anyone who's going to not have a proper agenda as part of their government. So I think, but at the end of the day, if those issues can really be accommodated, we are happy to work with the DA. And I think fortunately enough, if you look at the 16,000 people who participated, the biggest percentage actually started work with the DA. But at the end of the day, it's only 29%, but it is the highest. So basically, if you look at us as Action SA with an official mandate from South Africans, is that please talk to the DA, but not at all cost. The question of stability, I think let Michael handle that particular question.
Thank you very much. From Catherine, right?
Hand live, yes.
Yeah, thank you. So it's a very important question, and we need to make sure that this is at the heart of this entire process. And I actually would want to encourage members of the media to make it at the heart of your line of inquiry, because when you bring the concerns of South Africans down to their core, when it comes to coalitions, it's about the instability and the chopping and changes of government and the impact that that has on the reliability of the services that they receive. So there are a number of answers to that because it's a very important question. The first is that the transparency of these negotiations, of the agreements and the coalition management that follows needs to play a role. When these things are done openly, members of the media and members of the public are in a position to observe the behavior of political parties and criticize any organization that is acting in an irresponsible manner and producing instability through their irresponsible behavior. And it's something that I really would suggest to members of the media, this needs to be watched very carefully, because when political gamesmanship results in municipalities chopping and changing leadership, politicians are playing games, but residents are losing services. And that is why that is such an important part of that stability. I think the second point is the service delivery common agenda that we make central in our agreement. Because when you sit down in the beginning and you say it is non-negotiable for us that the residents of Tshwane must, in Hammanskraal, must have clean water within 12 months or 6 months or whatever represents the shortest, most urgent time period. And when you say that the JMPD needs to be enhanced through additional people and CCTV camera networks, and you deal with all of these issues right up front, you shouldn't have disagreements going forward. Because essentially that becomes your blueprint to governing. And the only question going forward is how do we allocate more resources and get the best people in those positions to deliver on those priorities. That has to be the most important instrument to achieving the stability at a local government level. But then also one of the things that we are stressing, and I didn't get into this earlier because there's obviously a lot of information and we will obviously share this all, is that these coalitions need to be managed locally. So councillors on the ground representing each political party need to be the primary individuals responsible for managing coalitions. You can't have people all the way across the country dealing with partial information, dealing with the day-to-day nitty-gritties. These people have to agree what's going to council, what is our position on these things. They need to talk about the coalition agreement and everybody's participation within it, anyone who's not living up to it, etc. But importantly, there has to be a much better management by political parties at a central or national level. I think some of the experience in 2016 is there was a kind of hands-off nature, and by the time it got there, it was too big a problem. What we actually need to have is national representatives of each party who don't just wait for a problem, they are proactively involved, they're being briefed on a quarterly basis by executive mayors, they are engaging in the issues, they know what the challenges and opportunities are, they don't learn things by surprise, which creates panic and instability. This is all sound principles in the stable management of coalitions. And there's obviously a whole bunch of further points that I don't want to get into, but these are some of the ideas that Action SA wants to put down on the table. But again, I want to stress, these are our ideas. And consistent with this outcome, there will be other ideas beyond ours, and we remain open to engaging other political parties, hearing what their ideas are, and ensuring that we combine the best of approaches for the stability that residents are looking for.
Who am I missing? Go ahead. So you had a question. Do you have a question, sir? All right, I'll give it to you, and then I'm going to ask the ones that are online. Do you have a question?
Yes. Hi, my name is...
All right, now let me give it to your colleague first. Go ahead.
Okay, Molwen, I want you to remember SABC News. The same week, on Friday, I wish I was a fly in the wall in that meeting. but the DA said to you that they want to control one. Did they expand at all on how this, if it happened, what in terms of the mayorship part? Thank you.
Thank you. I'll give it to you, sir, in the outside the door.
I'm Silva from UFM.
Sorry, can you take off your mask? We can't hear you.
So I'm Silva from UFM. Last week, the EFF, they mentioned that they are willing to work with any party that wants to take back the land without expropriation. As Action SA, are you also keen on that?
Thank you. Right over here.
Hi, thank you. My name is Kalpa Delupanendile. I'm from Jacaranda FM. Mr. Rudy, this is for you. You mentioned something about not being happy with the EFF speech, but also having to go through the document. Can you just tell us what is it that Action SA is unhappy about, rather? Just give us some information on that.
Great, thank you. I'll take the last one at the back.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not a journalist. I'm not a politician. We have seen.
Can you give us your name, please?
My name is Buwaje. I'm a member of Action SA. I'm interested to know if could there be any legislation that safeguards this coalition government, because previously they have failed this man, and then they failed to do justice to the masses. Yet our constitution doesn't say anything about the regulation of the coalition. Then the second point is how could the local government be partnering with the crime busters, in the procurement system? But if it happens in Gauteng, other metros, they will be left vulnerable. So how do we deal with that in moving forward towards the amendment of our constitution for the sustainability of the service delivery?
All right. That's a mouthful, but I'm going to take the last one because I forgot here. I will come back to you in the next one. Let me take you, ma'am.
We can't hear.
Yeah.
Please, can you tell us who you are? And
My
then
name is Tando Mayeko from Business Day.
Tando Mayeko.
Yes. So Mr. Mashaba had previously told us that during his tenure as the mayor of Johannesburg, one of the things that made it difficult to be mayor was that some DA prominent leaders had constantly come to him regarding discussions over tenders. Now, you said that you're not opposed to working with the DA and your relationship with them is water under the bridge. How do you expect to move forward and avoid that discussions over tenders again happening?
All right, I think those are enough. John?
Just before we do, John, sorry, just 1 second. John, sorry, can I just say, I didn't catch your name in the front, ma'am, about the question to do with the EFF proposal. Thank you. If I can just suggest, if you don't mind, that's a question we're just going to hold back for now, primarily because, as John mentioned earlier, that proposal was only received last night. It hasn't yet been digested. So if you don't mind, that'll be one of the questions we say, would you mind giving us a little bit more time so we can engage a bit more frankly in that discussion? Thank you.
Thank you, Michael, for clarifying that. That would be my response to you. We don't want to jeopardize any.
Sir, can I interject? We're not getting audio. Mics are very fast.
Yeah, I think in that situation or that stage in negotiations, we would not feel comfortable making any discussions public because it could jeopardize negotiations moving forward. And Michael has more than aptly responded to that one. As far as the discussions went on Friday with the DA, it was a simple approach from their side that they are looking at a stable government in Tshwane that can deliver efficiently and effectively to the people of that metropole. And that was a pitch, and that is where it ended. There was no discussions in terms of nuts and bolts, in terms of trade-offs, etc. Hence I said earlier on that he came to me as a bit of a surprise that all of a sudden, in the media we have to learn about the fact that the DA has no problem with Mashaba mayoralship in Johannesburg.
Thank you. I think just to address some of the questions that were raised there. The question from our member at the back, I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name. The acoustics is not great in this room, please forgive us. But the question about legislation, it's not something that Action SA has discussed as a group in terms of a policy position. But I do want to say that perhaps the experience in local government is that local government is already a very heavily legislated environment. It's probably the most overly legislated environment in the world. And the idea that legislation can solve problems is not always correct. And I give you the example that when you look at the process that municipalities have to go through to award tenders and contract work to build homes and all sorts of things, those things are designed to stop corruption, and yet there's a lot of corruption taking place. So we need to ensure that we have the right solutions. I would venture that the very best way of making sure that coalitions work for people is by bringing people into coalitions. And what we mean by that is engagements like this, where we're opening our doors to members of the media and we're inviting you to participate in discussions about how coalitions are formed and how they are run and the extent to which they are successful or not, so that this can become something that South Africans are actively invited into and involved in, which I think becomes an important point. I think there was a question by Catherine I got from Lerato before I hand over to Herman in respect of lifestyle audits. I think really what we're talking about is an annual process through which political leaders are continuously audited to ensure that people aren't living beyond their means and that the income that they have is accounted for, and that we can be assured that there is no income coming into their lives that is the product of inappropriate or behavior or malfeasance, which is really what we're talking about in that regard. It is actually a central part of Action SA and our policy that not only must this be the case for political leadership, but it must also be the case for those parts of municipalities that happen to be very front-facing in business interactions. So when you talk about your town planning applications and those places where businesses and people interact and make applications to municipalities, that individuals involved in those processes are continuously being audited in terms of their income and their lifestyles, which we believe is an important point. And many of these things will actually be merely to demonstrate that people are operating lawfully and responsibly, which is important. We don't expect that these things will turn up results that will shock everyone all the time. But really what it will do is just demonstrate and provide assurance to people that when parties are working together in coalition, it is not a coalition of what we can do for ourselves. It is a coalition of service delivery and residents that are central in our agenda.
I would actually like to elaborate further on the issue of dealing with corruption. There's just no way in the world you can ever defeat corruption for as long as our law enforcement agencies do not work. No amount of legislation will deal with corruption or crime. We've got a situation right now. As you go out of this hotel, there's a crime scene. A crime scene. I've been calling this a crime scene. This piece of land, the prime piece of land in our country, or if not on the African continent. This piece of land gifted to a Gupta-linked company. I raised this matter with more than enough evidence. People have not been prosecuted. The city lost this piece of land to give them, and South Africans are not taking this matter seriously. Even this morning in social media platforms, If I had the right, if I had the mandate, I can tell you I'd really be getting this police ring fencing, because this area where the center station is, it's a crime scene, serious crime scene. The city of Johannesburg lost that city, this piece of land, gifted to a good linked company. Today sitting, I believe, having a 32,000 rands breakfast every morning. I don't know what people eat for 32 million rands. So as long as we don't really have our law enforcement agencies acting on criminality, we're not going to get anywhere. No amount of laws. And South Africa does not need additional laws. In fact, we need to reduce the number of legislation that we have in our country, including actually the appointment and firing of Section 56 managers. It's actually, for me, one of the most ridiculous piece of legislation South Africa's actually invented. Over and above what are called draconian laws, coming from the private sector, I know how our draconian laws have destroyed businesses and destroyed livelihoods. And over and above that, to protect this inefficient, corrupt officials, to still have legislation that protects Section 56 managers. I'm happy at your leisure I can tell you the process of actually firing a Section 56 manager. Someone who's still stolen public monies, someone who's failed to deliver on their mandate to serve society. Unfortunately, our criminal justice system needs to really look at themselves. I think for us as a say we've made it really very clear. Come 2024, one of the demands we will have, or when we're in government, to bring back the scorpions as a matter of agency, with more independence from political interference. I would love to live in a country where the head of the MP is not appointed by the president of the country. There's someone who is actually appointed by the residents, so that they must prosecute without any fear or favor. Now, dealing with the question of land expropriation, it's one of the issues that was put forward in the media. Us as Action SA, we don't have time to waste about expropriation of land without compensation at local government level. This is a national competency. But we are happy and unapologetic about this, that even at national government level will not accept such piece of legislation. We don't want to destroy this country. We don't really, we support the current constitutional framework covering expropriation of land without compensation. I think there are enough and acceptable and viable options. I don't have to remind you, when I was the mayor of the city of Johannesburg, I became unpopular with the beneficiaries of the criminality that was happening in the city of Johannesburg. We managed to expropriate properties which were hijacked, derelict, abandoned. And that's something that we offered to the residents of Johannesburg, that give us the mandate, we are going to expedite this process. We are not going to allow to have abandoned buildings, hijacked buildings, derelict buildings, when our people live in squalor in Orange Farm, 80 kilometers from the employment opportunities, when we can get the private sector to build affordable accommodation for our people. So the question of land expropriation, please, if you want to talk to us, don't really bring this to attention, because it's a deal breaker for Action SA.
Thank you, Mr. While you have the floor, a question from Lizetta Tandwa from the Maiden Guardian. I'm going to ask her questions because they are online, but while you have the floor, can you answer the one around whether or not you would be prepared to be a councillor and also sit on the mayoral committee? The same question, Mr. John Moody, is also posed at yourself.
Okay, yeah, there was a question around constant approach by the tenders. I think it's not constant. It was only one case of a senior DA person asking me to put him in touch. I think it will be a misrepresentation that there was a constant request by the DA for tenders. I think I don't know where that comes from. What is the fact is that the senior member of DA came to my house to request to put him in touch with the MMC of police and the chief of police. So I think we've got to really be clear about that. There was no constant request. And I think let me also make it really very clear also, while I have this opportunity to clarify something to you as South Africans, that in the 3 years in government with their coalition partners, I've had numerous regular contacts with the EFF. In the 3 years I've worked with the EFF has never discussed the tender with me. But obviously there are lots of accusations of me being involved with tenders with the EFF, including some of the parties actually spending millions of rands asking people not to vote for me because of my relationship with the EFF. I think it's these are people who are prepared to lie without having any shame, just create some kind of fiction. If there's anyone from the EFF who said I've ever discussed a tender with me, maybe in their dreams, because and that's something that I've always made it really very clear that when people have a dream and obviously take that dream to be reality, and then the following day I'm asked about confirmation of that dream. Please, I wasn't part of anyone's dream. It's unfair if you dream about something and you take that dream to be reality and then you ask me to be part of that. In the 3 years I've worked with the EFF has never discussed the tender with me. And also, I think also very important to really bring to the media and people of South African Johannesburg in particular. In the 3 years, we fired a lot of people for corruption, more especially Section 56 managers. And to fire Section 56 manager, that report must go through to council. Not a single time where I produced evidence of corruption. Where I produced evidence of corruption, the EFF has ever voted against that report. But I cannot say something about the party I was representing, because every time, I'm sure you're aware, I fired 3 MMCs from my own party, and the last one I had to actually threaten to resign, because for me, I wasn't asking for the party's permission. I was just being courteous, as my nature, to say, Mr. So-and-so is corrupt, here's the evidence, and if the party says, give us a chance to really read this report. But I said, here's the report, I'm not prepared to wait 24 hours to fire this person. If you as a party don't allow me, I'm prepared to resign, and you can call me back after you've made the decision. John was in that meeting in FedEx. So, is the party corrupt? I cannot really say that they're corrupt. It is for that reason I'm happy to entertain discussions with them. Around the EFF, because we allowed the team yesterday to engage the EFF, we still have to really get the details of what they've discussed, because they've not discussed it themselves fully after receiving an official proposal. I've read so much about EFF involvement in corruption, but for us as the City of Johannesburg, as Herman Mashaba is the former mayor of the City of Johannesburg, I don't have anything except what I read about in the papers. And that is where the question of the failure of our criminal justice system comes to the fore. Because if anyone gets involved in corruption, anyone gets involved in crime. You expect our law enforcement agencies to act so that society does not have to second guess or come out with fiction. Because we create a situation where, as far as a lot of people are concerned, Ahmed Mashaba is one of the most corrupt human beings on earth. But I'm saying, always saying, but if Ahmed is corrupt, how come you don't unleash the criminal justice system against him? And I've always said, and I'm saying that I can tell you something as the media and people of South Africa. I strongly believe that if it can ever happen that anyone can find Herman Mashaba having stolen a cent of public monies, I'm totally convinced that my arrest is not going to happen behind the scenes. The President of the Republic of South Africa is going to call a family meeting. If ever can happen that anyone can find that Herman Mashaba has stolen public money, public funds, the President of the Republic of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, is going to call a family meeting to announce that the former mayor of the city of Johannesburg stole 2 cents of your money.
That didn't happen after 2024, Mr. Mashaba, because he may not be president.
No, but the thing is, there is this narrative. Every time discussions are held, people say, but when I talk about corruption, but then I'll be accused to say, but you were also corrupt. But if I'm also corrupt, how come then I'm not arrested? Because I strongly believe if Herman Mashaba has stolen public money, he must be arrested. It should not really be something that we throw at each other as if we are playing football. If they steal public money, they must be arrested. We've got law enforcement agencies in this country to investigate and prosecute people who steal public monies, so that it's not a question that every time I get involved in a public debate around corruption, they say, but you are also corrupt. I find this totally unacceptable, and I think some people in the media actually have bought into this kind of narrative, keep asking me like I'm a broken record. If ever Herman Mashaba has stolen public money, Herman Mashaba must be prosecuted. I don't expect any favors or any protection from our law enforcement agencies, and I expect them to do the job not only with Herman Mashaba. They must prosecute anyone who steals public monies.
Would you be prepared to form part of NACO, Mr. Mashaba, or be a councillor? Just briefly, as we run out of time.
I think we're not dealing here with an academic exercise. We're in the middle of negotiations, sensitive negotiations. And I think it would be irresponsible for me to start putting demands that are not a deal breaker. For me, whether I'm a mayor or a MACO, honestly, there's not a deal breaker. But one thing for sure is that tomorrow, actually, there's a first council meeting. I am going to be a councillor. There's a first council meeting tomorrow. I am going to be there. I probably will be one of the first people at that council meeting.
All right, John, you have the same question. Very briefly, colleagues, I'm taking the very last round of questions. I'm sorry, out of time. Can you, John, can you answer?
Lerato, I think that the President has spoken. I think that the President has more than adequately answered that question. We are here to serve, we are not here to seek positions.
Sorry, and then I think there was one final question by Lizek, and I do want to stress we are severely limited for time. But Lizek asked a question about the loss of votes associated with the issue of the ballot paper that was dealt with on the floor of the National Results Centre when we delivered that press conference. Basically, the situation remains unchanged. The only thing that has changed is the final result in we've had a greater sense of the quantum of the gap between the PR votes that Action SA received and the ward votes. There does appear to be about 60,000 more PR votes than ward votes, which is severe in terms of the quantum and the material impact that that issue has had to the election. It still remains 25% more PR votes than ward votes. And it's important to remind you that when you look at all other political parties, and I invite you to do so, the difference between their ward votes and their PR votes is normally about 0.10 or 0.100%. The discrepancy we are referring to, as far as I'm concerned, is unprecedented in recent South African political history. So as to whether or not it's had a material impact, we have no doubt. Our current position is to hold for the reasons from the Electoral Court. You'll remember all we received was the verdict of the court. We need the reasons of the court to study those reasons, to assess what was their reasoning and rationale, so that we can determine how, if at all, we intend to respond to that situation. But until we receive the reasons, we remain very much at a holding pattern.
All right, I know I kept you waiting for the last question. Please go ahead.
All right, thank you very much. My name is Belan Fahadian from Newsroom Africa. Mr. Mashawa Collective, you say by all means you are not prepared to talk, but those who voted for the ANC are the people that you were also sampled in your methodology when you were doing a communication. So the people have voted for the ANC wherever that they have. So do you think you will not be talking that type of governance when you are not even prepared to engage their leaders? Perhaps you may be even able to persuade them otherwise to support your ambitions as actually say. That will be the first one that I want to ask. Why not ANC and deal the corruption issues with the legal groups? The second one, Masima has asked this, and I heard you talk about it quite a number of times, Mr. Mashawa. But I want to understand, is it not your bargaining tool that with our 16% we are bringing, we are asking you to support our mayoral ambitions? If not, we will support you in other ways. I'm asking you in the fight. I hear you are talking to us, but I want you to give us a direct answer. Are you bargaining to be a mayor of the city of Johannesburg, the city of Tshwane, the city of Ekurhuleni? Are you saying, let's actually say we have our candidates, can we bargain as mayors through the 16% that we're talking about?
All right, very last question. We're out of time. Please go ahead. I know I hadn't seen you.
All right, mine is Innocent from Ellington and Corsair. It's directed to Michael. Michael, you said that you want to deploy people with good ethics and you explained earlier, you spoke about the performance management program. How is it going to work? Just clarity on that.
All right, I'm going to give it to Michael and then we'll end with the president. Thank you so much, colleagues.
Thank you very much. So I think the important point to start off with is you can never know what is in someone's heart when you appoint them. You can try and find the most qualified, competent, ethical people, and there's an obligation that we will meet in doing so. But the real commitment that we make is that when we find people don't live up to that standard, we will act, and we will act decisively. And I think that's the first important point. When it comes to performance management system, what we're really talking about is a combination of political performance management and administrative, because there is a difference. In other words, one of the things that can cause instability in a coalition is if you have a scenario where, let's say, you have an MMC from a political party, and that MMC is not performing their work effectively, and when the executive mayor needs to address that, it becomes a question of instability. So our coalition agreement actually prescribes how we would want that dealt with in such a way where it is done openly and without it becoming a question of instability, which is an important starting point. It also means that every one of those political office bearers needs to sign a performance agreement in terms of what their work entails and how it is to be measured. Because it is important when we're talking about performance management, we're not talking about pie in the sky, we're talking about real objectives that have been accomplished or not. In terms of the administration, this is probably where the point becomes even more important, because while some people focus on MMCs and mayors, understandably because of the leadership role they play, the quantum of a municipality, let's say like the city of Joburg, has over 30,000 employees. The collective impact of getting 30,000 people working more effectively for residents is exponential, it's huge. It's the most important thing that any political leader can accomplish. And that is why the performance management system there is essential. So it needs to start at a departmental level. If what you're saying is that as a department, let's call it like a department like Johannesburg Roads Agency, to give you an example. If they have an obligation to resurface 400 kilometers of roads in a given financial year, that objective needs to be broken down so that the departments and team members within JRA who are involved in that project each take responsibility for their part, and they are measured on their part. And when you have those objectives filtering down from the top to the bottom of the institution, you have everyone pulling in the same direction, and you have the correct alignment in terms of how you determine who is performing and who is not performing. And that's what we mean by a performance management system throughout the length and depth of the organization.
Dr. Pelani, regarding the ANC, why not engage the ANC? I think it's an impossible discussion to have. You can imagine South Africa has got massive problems from corruption, mismanagement, criminality, and all sorts of things. So you can imagine, to go into a coalition with the ANC, we signed it and they've agreed. The first case, let's say, for an example, I get into Johannesburg. I must pursue this crime scene I've just indicated to you. You know, this crime scene involves senior people, even in national government. Tell me, that meeting is going to collapse. First meeting we're going to have. So now, should I really entertain such a coalition arrangement? Because it's bound to fail. You don't have to be a rocket scientist that this meeting is going to collapse, because an arrangement with the ANC, and I'm calling for the arrest of the cabinet ministers. Do you think that government is not going to collapse? So therefore, I don't think one will have to really waste their time in that respect. So it is for that reason we can never entertain the discussions with the ANC, because the ANC is a problem. People of South Africa have spoken, and spoken loudly, not in a big way. They've really rejected ANC. So for us to bring the ANC through the back door would really be criminal, actually, would be evil. And the question of mayorship or MMCs, this is not really about positions. It's about serving society the best way possible. So I think for us to put such a minor issue as a precondition would be irresponsible. Yes, if anyone wants to get involved with us in government, we want to see what type of structure, and we would also like to really be government, but we are not going to really put it as a condition that will be a deal breaker. Who's going to be the mayor? Let's put it the best person as a mayor of any particular municipality where our vote is needed. We are not going to really accept putting someone for convenience. No ways we can accept a question of putting a mayor of grass cutting in place. No ways we can accept that. With that, people of Central can cut grass for themselves. People need toilets in this country. So those are our considerations. We want people all the goes to mayor. We need, if we're going to really support any government, it must be a government that is going to put competent people who are going to understand the complexities that people don't have toilets in this country. ANC has subjected them to squalor, and we've got to get our people out of that kind of an arrangement. And it must be that mayor for us to accept. So we have to ensure that mayor and their party are committed to ensure that social justice is part of our agenda.
Okay. I don't know what happened, but that's it, colleagues. Oh, there you go. That's it. Thank you so very much. Thank you to the members of the Action SA Coalition's negotiating team. Mr. President, Mr. Michael Bowman, all of our colleagues who are here, members of the media, both who are here present with us, and those who have joined us virtually, and the rest of South Africa. Until the next one, thank you so much.
Thank you, Lorato.
Otherwise, you're never going to do it.